bit of the pop on this Howard Terminal site for the Coliseum site, which is a sort of more old, not old style, but more sort of, non heavy duty urban, like
right.
Wrigley
right.
or Fenway,
Fenway,
which are just extraordinary urban experiences.
Right.
The summary of me really is, I would describe myself as a citizen architect. Okay. And I came to architecture probably as a result of my parents and psychology. My father was a professor and practitioner in vocational rehabilitation. My mother was a business administrator. They both had, I would say, disabilities from birth, cerebral palsy and other health conditions, but they were really amazing pioneers in encouraging thought. And so my early sort of training was really a little bit about psychology and then more about the built environment. And I was in a pioneering program in Buffalo. There's a bunch of sort of AIA, and I'll come back to that overlay on that. Mm-hmm. And then, so I advanced into sort of a, more of a conventional path on getting a professional degree at a graduate level in Philadelphia at Penn, and then worked in Philadelphia for a big corporate firm, and then moved out to California in 81, driven by my parents, who basically picked up all the stuff that they had after they had come to California for some postdoctoral work my father had done to discover the Bay Area in San Francisco, and just absolutely said, we're quitting our jobs, we're selling our house, we're moving to California. And they did that. And then it took us, my wife and I, probably 6 or 7 years, maybe less, to get out here, to come out here, mm-hmm. as a result of wanting that family connection. Mm-hmm. And I would say that's probably the turning point in terms of, it's far more, it's far clearer now relative to how networking is so important and how we're all connected in some degrees of separation. Anyway, so I often sort of go back to this commentary or my comment that my father made about me joining a professional association after I graduated. And I said, Dad, I'm just going to go and, get a job and begin my architectural training. And so with that, that was sort of the framework for ultimately what became practice in the Bay Area with my partner, Heller, mm-hmm. From pretty much the day I got here, becoming involved with the AIA, and being interested in sort of Bay Area and particularly San Francisco issues on urban design, mm-hmm. Led the fight and lit the fire on the demolition of the Embarcadero Freeway, and then was appointed by the mayor to head up a citizens advisory committee, which I oversaw for 10 years on the whole Rincon Hill Transbay build out. And so I was, this is all non-paying. Same time, I'm actually with my day job working in a firm that actually has my name now since 84, mm-hmm. on a pretty robust practice in, every possible architectural scale, urban infill, and learned an enormous amount about liability insurance as a result of it, because we were doing condominiums. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
so I learned a lot about how to sort of duck that responsibility, but it created an enormous amount of housing. Through my AI involvement and my urban design stuff, I ultimately was encouraged to become the president of the San Francisco chapter. I was on the California board, and then just sort of felt that I wanted to bring West Coast sensibility back to the East Coast and DC and the bigger AIA organization, and joined the board and, was on the board and like in most things, people pat you on the back and they say, "Oh, you speak out. You're saying stuff that I wish I had. And why don't you just keep going? You should aspire to this." So, long story short, elected to a vice president, and then ultimately became the president of the organization. So, as the saying goes, I'm number 87 in the organization's creation as a national president of 80,000 members. So I know this entire organization probably as good as anybody, and I'm now been drawn back into helping the chapter, San Francisco, Aaron knows this, in the physical creation of the Center for Architecture and Design. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anybody's talked about that, but that's an extraordinary opportunity to, if you're familiar with the Chicago Foundation's space in Chicago with regard to architecture and urban design and exposure, it's probably one of the best in the world. We can't create that level, but we actually are going to be a street level space where the public can mm-hmm. come and begin to sort of experience architecture and design, whether it's a seminar, ultimately when we get back to that, or educational and stuff like that. So my exposure to the organization, foundation, probably less at a local level, more at a national level. I was a member of the national, it's the Architects Foundation, but it's great. It's great things for the public. It's a really important things in terms of doing that. And I would just sort of say, it's one of those circumstances that sort of occurs that you don't really take note of, and ultimately it forms. So my career is really between professional service to the my home city, where my practice is, and my professional career in terms of doing buildings and getting them built and high level sustainability. Anyway, that's my elevator pitch.
I love it. That's a good one. It's a very extensive one. So just so I understand, so right now you are in what role with the national AIA? You're
10 years out of being the national president.
Okay.
I was national president in 2011. And so I'm just an ordinary former president,
I love it.
And I've always lived in Oakland, mm-hmm. always practiced in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. I'm now coming on almost 5 years as an Oakland planning commissioner.
Oh, okay. So
where in San Francisco I was presenting to the commission, and I know that gig very well. Yeah. I'm now on the other side making judgments on the scope of projects. And so that's been pretty exciting. So yeah, the A's stadium is going to be really interesting. It's very different than the Giants, I think, in terms of its sort of location. The A's as a team are different,
Correct.
Are you an A's fan?
So ironically enough, as much as you can be, and this is a cop-out answer, but I'm both. So I was born and raised a Giants fan, going to Candlestick, right, before AT&T was built, and have some great memories there. And dad, grandfather, huge Giants fans. And then of course, when they built that stadium in the early 2000s, it was this most amazing experience. And I remember our first game we went, and I sat about as far away up on the upper deck as you could get. And it was still just spectacular. Fast forward to about 2016, and I started doing some very limited side work for the Oakland A's. And I still do that in that capacity, like 1 to 2 to 3 games a year. I go help out their grounds crew. And it started.
That's fun.
It's pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie. Really, it's the best job.
I'm a hardcore fan from my dad, my son, my grandson. So I've never had that experience. Wow.
Yeah. It started when the Raiders were still here, because the A's and the Raiders would have overlap, and so you do what's called a changeover, and you literally turn it from either from a baseball field into a football field if you were going that direction, or the other way around. And they needed all hands on deck, right? I mean, our most extreme changeover was in 2017, I believe. It was a Raiders preseason game that started on 7:00 on Thursday night, and the A's were playing against the Yankees 7:00 Friday night. So it's like 11:00 on this Raiders game, and you're like, we start work, and we just went, and you sleep a little bit, but it is intense. But then you get to sit in the dugout and do the whole thing. It's great. I love it.
Awesome.
So I follow it, right? I follow it. And then, in my former job, I worked in Jacqueline Square. So I'm very familiar with that space and
Yeah.
the intricacies of that whole layout, and it is interesting, right? I mean, we talk about, they're having trouble keeping, businesses alive, and COVID has not made that any easier, but and then, moving right outside of there and some of the housing and some of the issues that come along with that. So I'm very curious. I was just,
I think the A's stadium, probably the biggest challenge is Schnitzer Steel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
So anyway, you were going to say
no, I was just saying it's, I think an environmental report just came out, like a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
They just published it.
They just published it. Right. And I don't know that there was anything raising too many red flags on that, but but it's just curious to get people's ideas.
Well, I would tell you a couple of things. Certainly, we want the A's to stay here. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So it's not an easy formula. The Giants Park is in a mixed use area that was already becoming something, and they're actually developing one of those lots now. This is not very different than the A's scenario. But the A's scenario means that they're trying to move to a waterfront location. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But the other sort of challenge is that there is a metal smelting plant that's been there for decades that is incredibly profitable. Mm-hmm. And that is a mega corporation, and they are not going to go anywhere else based on their controls. And then the sort of land planning associated with it, like the Giants, there's this sort of aspiration of really high density over there. Mm-hmm. I just don't see it happening for an exceptionally long amount of time if they were to do that. And the other real challenge is the connections to mass transit, which basically are on the other side of 880.
Right.
So, so you're balancing a little bit of the pop on this Howard Terminal site for the Coliseum site, which is a sort of more not old style, but more sort of, non-heavy duty urban, like Wrigley, or Fenway, which are just extraordinary urban experiences.
Right.
People get to see baseball. They come there. They eat, they drink. I mean, we'll ultimately get back for that once everybody's sort of vaccinated. But those for me, and I think AT&T, is that what's it's called now? Or is it Oracle? No, it's not Oracle.
It's not Oracle.
Whatever the name is, I forgot what it is.
I still call it Pac Bell, so I know that's not it anymore.
That was number one.
That was number one.
But that's exactly right. I mean, we go to a lot of games, and we basically walk there.
Right.
And that's really I think the essence of what those experiences are. And I think that's really their biggest challenge. These sort of fanciful ideas of gondolas going across the freeway is like, are you serious?
Not gonna
that's a tourist thing. That's not moving an enormous amount of people. When the game's over, they're out of there.
Right.
We both know that. So
Anyway. There's a lot to unpack there, but I love this. Somebody mentioned this in I don't know, it was a post or an article I read, but it was the idea of, Wrigley and Fenway is like 100 years old, I think, pretty close to it.
Yeah.
At those times, baseball parks were in the city. It was part of the city life, right?
Yeah.
We went and we kind of moved them out, and that's kind of what the Coliseum represents. Is it's pretty isolated, but it also has a huge parking area. And when I was a kid, we would go to Giants games and A's games, and they were just completely different experience, right? You would drive to an A's game. Maybe you could take Bart, but you'd probably drive. You were going to tailgate, right? You were going to bring your barbecue, and you were going to have, it was maybe a day game, and you'd go inside and it wasn't full, and the whole experience. The Giants game, we were going to take Bart in because it was in the San Francisco, and I'm coming from the East Bay. We were probably going to walk to the stadium along the water line, right? And it was just a different, you weren't going to go grill food. You were going to go inside because they had all the different food, and it was just a different experience. So I'm wondering, when you say
I think the latter, which the Giants have captured. And there are a lot of restaurants and places, and there's a lot of people who sort of like go and they have a bite before, and then they go inside because it's a little different, or it's a little less expensive or whatever, but it's still in close proximity to it. And so there's this sort of environment versus going into the park, buying your hot dog and your beer, from a vendor inside there. And, for me, I remember, probably you were younger when these people used to roam through the stands with that stuff. And, I lived as a teenager in New York, 3 blocks from Yankee Stadium, the original Yankee Stadium.
The original one, okay.
And I do not remember ever, maybe once, ever going to that park. Yeah. Because my father and the Yankees and the Giants and the Dodgers, they were all they were very territorial. He was not a Yankees fan. He was a hardcore Giants fan. So I became that too. So I don't ever remember that, but I remember going by it. And like you said, it was literally in the midst of where the train was, where the pizza place was, where all the stuff that sort of supported and people sort of gathered to it. So I think that's my view. I mean, the A's have a really fine balance here. I think philosophically it was really unfortunate in terms of the way it got rolled out, but the best site was the Peralta site. Yeah, it was the much superior. And yes, it would have created problems relative to potential displacement or gentrification. But I do think that the financial components of the deal could have basically remedied that for those people who were displaced as a result of it. And I think it would much more of an urban park. It would have fit better. It would have been consistent with what we both remember as what's the sort of really wonderful experience of going to a baseball game and, whether friend, family, whatever, so yeah. So it's, they're in a hard spot, and, will somebody learn? Way hard to say. So, they have a very difficult challenge there. Not everybody's in spite of that people being in support of baseball. So anyway, so what are your other questions? Have we hit some of them?
Actually, to be honest with you, I could talk about this. It's funny. So you mentioned Yankee Stadium. My wife and I took a trip to Boston in September of 2019. Feels like forever ago. It was like a year ago. And she played college softball and comes from a huge dirt sport family, baseball, softball.
So she knows.
So this was a pilgrimage, right? This
wow.
And she had never been. I had never been. We happened to catch the Red Sox playing the Giants.
Oh,
and wow. Bruce Bochy's 2000th win. It was just like, you couldn't write this stuff, right?
Oh my gosh.
And so we were lucky enough. We went and had this amazing experience at Fenway. And it is true. I mean, the stadium's 100 years old. It's got all this history. Field of Dreams, right? Just like all these, it
is.
And they close off the road, the streets, right? So you can literally leave the park in the middle of the game and go out, and they're selling stuff, and there's sports bars running afterwards. We left Boston on a Friday. We took a bus to New York City, and we caught a Yankee game on that Friday night. And that's the new Yankee Stadium. I didn't get to go to the old.
My wife and I went to the new Yankee Stadium, and we're not impressed.
Different experience.
We were like, this is pretty vanilla and corporate. This isn't fun. And I remember the other one being just so steeped in baseball history.
Right. History, right? I mean, literally the championships won, and the players that played in that park. This felt like a new movie theater. It was just, everything was in HD. Like,
that's
it was
a
just
good analogy, Zach. That's I hadn't thought of that. That's a really great analogy.
It was crazy. And, we liked it. Like, it wasn't, I wouldn't say I was disappointed in the experience. We took the subway, we did the whole New York thing, but coming from Fenway 3 days earlier, it was just like.
So your wife and you've been to Wrigley, of course, right?
We have not. That's on our list.
Okay. Yeah. So our son-in-law, who's a Chicago boy, met my wife when she was living in Chicago, and he grew up there for his entire life, and his mother still lives there. And he basically, he's a huge Cubs fan, okay? And on top of that, he was also an usher while he was a kid.
Yeah.
So when we went to visit them, we would go to Wrigley, and it is very, very, very much like Fenway. So if you've been to Fenway, it's the same dynamic.
I can only imagine.
It's tiny and it's a little tired.
Yes,
but it's really just like Fenway. My wife and I were at a game at Fenway, but it got rained out. So we were sitting in the upper deck underneath cover, right? And we just sat there for, I think, probably a bunch of innings, and then ultimately it got called. But it was still a really great sort of bonding experience.
Ours was so spectacular. So Samantha, my wife, one on her bucket list was to sing Sweet Caroline at Fenway Park, right? Like, that's it. Like, nailed it, right? So we did not do our research, and we both just kind of assumed that it would be during the 7th inning stretch. So we go out to the bleachers. We had seats that were kind of, up a little higher. We go out to the bleachers, and the 7th inning stretch comes, and they sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And we were kind of mortified. We didn't tell each other, but we were like, did we just miss it? Like, did you not do it today? And it turns out they do it in the 8th inning, right? And so I have a selfie video of her doing it.
So you were prepared in the 8th inning.
We were prepared. I think we hopped on our phones and Google, when do they do Sweet Caroline in Fenway?
That's great.
Wrigley's on the list for sure. But baseball, it's kind of to swing it back to architecture. I mean, these are the communities that we build, right? I mean, these are integral pieces into making the flow and the ebb and flow of how our communities roll, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's just crazy. It's interesting to me. This is just fascinating, right? I hope we can get it right. I hope the A's can get it right. I hope it works out well. Waterfront Park would be amazing.
I hope so too. And I've lived in Oakland for as long as I've been in California, always practiced in the city. And it's got a lot of really amazing things that are happening, but it's got a lot of challenges, as any city does. And, it's always sort of in the shadow of San Francisco in terms of the sort of national profile, but great place. I agree. A lot of good stuff.
No, I love it. Well, I'll be honest with you. I had no idea we were going to go there, and I told you. I know. I have a lot that I've sort of a lot of exposure to the organization. Sure.
That you're a part of helping to create visibility. There's never enough people. There's always a core of people who are willing to sort of do it. And it is a great sort of satisfaction. These podcasts with people, with somebody who has the skill like you do, you definitely have the skill, is a good way of capturing the essence of what that person can offer to somebody else in terms of motivation, and maybe potentially create a mentor. It's probably easier to do it this way than the way that we probably have always been looking at. I'm just sort of thinking about that as you've sort of talked about it, where you get everybody, okay, what are you going to do? And so this is an opportunity for somebody who wants to find a mentor, right? To find somebody who fits, they look like me, or they think like me, or they have a similar experience to me. And technology offers a much bigger platform to be able to do that. So I think in many ways you are really doing yeoman's job, as I hear you saying it, in terms of giving this, from high school down, the ability to actually, do I like doing that? I used to, my daughter probably did it more than my son did, but as she was sort of nearing the end of high school, she would have friends who were like, well, I think I want to be an architect. And it's like, Dad, would you talk to them? My friend Samantha is like, hey, absolutely. So Samantha, why don't you come visit my office? And then, do the dog and pony show, and, what excites you, or why do you want to do that? And this is an opportunity to sort of make that connection. So I like it.
I genuinely appreciate that. When you're talking about this, that's all the goal was with this, was really just, we are really lucky here in the Bay Area. We have this huge design community. It is very diverse, right? We have a lot here, and sometimes we're spoiled by that. Like sometimes we don't realize what we have. And we have so much experience. And so it's just, folks like you that take the time to just share it. It's just so many great stories and lessons and, things to be learned. And so this is a medium that I really enjoy, being able to just put that content out there.
I don't care what you end up doing. You may never be an architect, but your exposure to design and your environment and your ability to see those things is really important.
Absolutely.
It's part of life experience. So,
I love it.
Yep.
Clark, this was absolutely amazing. I really appreciate it.
Kudos to you. And I didn't know what to expect. I
hit record in there pretty early. It was just like, we'll figure it out. Clark, thanks so much.
Take care. And good luck on being a father soon.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.